In this video, I will show you a very simple and cool color technique how to improve your shot by additional light point to the frame, using only native tools in DaVinci. As a cinematographer, I always strive to create emotional and attractive shots that are able to intensify story and director's work. However, while working with the final materials, I sometimes realize that the certain shots need to be improved with color correction. And I'd like to share one amazing technique that involves working with lighting during post-production. I will use DaVinci Resolve as my primary tool for color grading. Okay, I want to show you this shot and how it can look more volumetric. To begin the color grading process, we first need to convert the footage to Rec 709, which involves selecting the appropriate input color space and gamma. Whenever I work with any camera, I try to find a manual from the camera developers, such as Arri, Blackmagic, or Red. This helps simplify the workflow and assures that I selected the right parameters for converting the footage. Okay, now we have the colored, converted footage, but there are a few things that I don't like about it. Firstly, there is a lack of contrast, making the background appear flat and monochromatic. Additionally, the bright background in this shot is the only area that stands out, and it looks strange since we can see the source of the light. To address these issues, I suggest creating a few light areas in the background using masks. By adding a few points to simulate daylight and introduce additional light tones among the dull gray background, we can better match the bright background on the character. It is important not to make this light area look unrealistic. So I try to blur the borders to avoid drawing too much attention to them. Additionally, the brightness of these light areas should not be too high, as we want them to look natural. Okay, let's track in each mask using Native Tracker. Our goal is to avoid drawing too much attention to the light in the background. Therefore, it's better to slightly underlight the area these masks instead of overlighting them. Okay, let's make this shot more contrasting by adding negative fill. This way is quite simple to add some light or dark areas because we have a slow and smooth camera movement, which makes masking and tracking a little easier. To create an additional note, let's make a shadow side to the character by means of mask. We have the ability to use any tool to make this area darker, but I prefer using a curve adjustment. I turn down the midtones to make it a little darker. Then we track this mask. We were able to create a dark side without a negative fill frame, saving us at least 50 minutes of setup time on the set. To make it even more realistic, we can select the light tones by qualifier tool on the face and increase their brightness slightly, which will further enhance the contrast between the light and shadow areas. In our case, this tool is suitable for skin tones since there are not many colors in the scene that resemble skin. By using this tool, we can avoid making a mask and tracking it. Turning down the midtones can make the skin appear more dense, while pulling up the light tones can make the skin look more contrasted. Having bright areas on the land and trees, while the sky has a dull tone, can look strange. We can fix this by using the qualifier tool to select and intensify the bright areas between the trees, and then cut out the extra areas using a mask. By brightening the top part of the image, you can enhance the overall contrast and create more dynamic and visually interesting shot. Just be careful not to overdo it, as it can make the image look too artificial and unnatural. Additionally, in the new node, I plan to incorporate a light gradient using a gradient mask on the upper point of the shot. This technique will effectively blend light and shadow areas, resulting in enhanced depth and volume within the frame. Furthermore, I aim to create a captivating cool haze effect in the foreground. And in the final stage of stylization for the whole image, it seems like the white balance is warm for my taste. To fix this, I adjust the gamma wheel to shift the overall color temperature towards the color side. Additionally, I depend the mid-tones to enhance the contrast between the light and dark areas, creating a more dramatic effect. As you can see, using free and simple DaVinci Resolve tools, curves, masks, tracking, and wheels, we're able to add some light points to make the shot more volumetric. When working on my own projects in post-production, I always strive to achieve good sound quality. To do this, I search for suitable music and sound effects that match the style of the video. Hiring a sound boom operator can be an expensive option, so I prefer to use resources like Epidemic Sound. With this platform, I can access a vast library of sound effects and music compositions, which come with a license for use on platforms like Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Check out the link in the description for a 30-day free trial to try out this amazing resource for your projects to use a professionally composed music and quality sound effects. Let's work on improving the next footage, which is my favorite. I shot it for my art project, the library. During post-production, I thought it would benefit from some additional light points to enhance the volumetric and contrast effect. To ensure the best color quality, I followed the standard workflow process recommended in the Red Manual and used DaVinci Resolve. In this footage, I like to add a light gradient to a part of the character's body to create an interesting visual effect. I'm a fan of incorporating light areas to provide a variety of lighting, midtones, and shadows in the frame, as it helps to make the image more volumetric. I prefer to blur the mask border to make the effect more subtle and less distracting for the viewers. Also, in order to seamlessly attach this mask to the body, we need to perform tracking. Ideally, I wouldn't have created this contrast during filming, but we can still make some improvements in post-production to create multiple light points using masks and curve. Let's also add some light to another area in the shot near the floor lamp. We can afford to do this on our own. I suggest making this light warm to make the color temperature of the lamp. To avoid affecting the character's skin tones, I will add another mask and track it to isolate the background. While working with masks, there is the risk of creating fake lighting effects. To avoid this, I employ a technique of blurring the transition between light and dark areas by increasing the mask frame and scale and applying blurring. I achieve a more natural and seamless blending of the light and shadows. Now that the major work is done, we can move on to the final stage. In the last node, I will increase the contrast of the shot by turning up the highlights and turning down the midtones and shadows. I personally like the denser quality that this gives the image. My approach to working with lighting in the post-production is to make subtle improvements to the image, while keeping in mind the overall idea of how I wanted the lighting to be in the scene. When I filmed this scene, it was a dull and rainy day, and I felt that the lighting in the scene was quite flat. Ideally, I wouldn't have added a negative fill to create deeper shadows in certain areas, but that wasn't possible at the time. After the color space transform from Unreal XM, let's focus on adding some shadows. We already have a shadow side to the left on the tree. To make the dark tone on the shadow side deeper, I use the same tools, a mask and a curve adjustment. Additionally, we can add a subtle negative fill on the camera side to create a vignette effect. To ensure it appears soft and natural, I will apply a blur to the shadows on the tree and the negative fill on the grass. Great. Now let's enhance the sky by adding a gradient to make it more volumetric, with a mix of dark and bright tones. I use the qualifier tool to select the entire sky tone. And then add one more mask in the same node to create the gradient effect. Since this shot is for dramatic and sad scene, I prefer to reduce the saturation of the bright colors on the grass by using the mask and adjusting the saturation values. Finally, on the last stage, I want to increase the contrast of the shot by deepening the shadows and slightly brightening the tones using the color wheels. So, I always use this technique to enhance the lighting for my shots. I hope it will be helpful for you as well. Thank you and goodbye.